Florence Sinclair laughed at the worst possible moment, right when Lord Pemberton asked for her hand in the quadrille, and the entire ballroom fell silent. She'd practiced the laugh for days. Too bright, too sharp, the kind that made dowagers clutch their fans and whisper hysteria. But then she caught the scent. Pine and smoke and something wild that didn't belong in a gaslit ballroom, and every careful word she'd prepared died in her throat. Across the room, through the sea of silk and candlelight, a man stood perfectly still in the doorway, tall, dark-haired, watching her with eyes that reflected the light wrong. He moved through the crowd like water parting, and Florence realized with cold clarity that her performance had just drawn the attention of something far more dangerous than scandal. "Miss Sinclair?" Pemberton's voice cracked. "Ted, are you quite well?" She forced her gaze back to him and smiled wider. "Do you see them too, my lord? The wolves at the windows?" The musician stopped mid-phrase. "Perfect." She spun away from Pemberton's horrified face and addressed the room at large, pitching her voice to Carrie. "They've been following me for weeks. Beautiful creatures, all silver and shadow." She let her eyes go distant, unfocused. "My late father used to say the old families kept wolves in their blood. Do you suppose that's why they watch me?" Lady Pemberton made a strangled sound. 2 footmen moved toward Florence, but she'd already calculated their positions. She drifted toward the terrace doors, still smiling, still performing. "Florence," Reginald's hand clamped on her elbow, fingers digging through silk. Her guardian's face was a mask of concern, and but his grip promised bruises. "You're overwrought, my dear. Let me take you home." "I'm not going anywhere with you." She said it clearly, loudly enough for the nearest guest to hear. "You forged my father's signature on that contract, and I can prove it." His smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "The grief has quite undone her reason," he announced to the room. "Dr. Marlowe warned me this might happen. The wedding preparations, her father's death. It's all been too much for her delicate nerves." "My nerves are perfectly sound." Florence jerked her arm free and immediately regretted it. The crowd pressed closer, avid for scandal. "What's unsound is a blood contract signed 3 months after my father died." "Enough." Reginald's voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. "You will stop this, or I will have you declared unfit before sunrise. Is that what you want?" Briarwood House has very accommodating physicians. The threat landed like a fist to her stomach. Briarwood, the private asylum outside town where inconvenient women disappeared behind locked doors and laudanum doses. She opened her mouth to respond, but the stranger's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Lord Crane?" The dark-haired man had materialized at Reginald's shoulder without a sound. Up close, he was devastating, sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it forgotten how to smile, shoulders that strained against his perfectly tailored coat. "I believe the lady has made her wishes clear." Reginald's face went carefully blank. "Baron Ravencroft, I wasn't aware you'd returned to town." "Obviously." The Baron's gaze slid to Florence, and in the impact of it nearly staggered her. Heat crawled up her spine despite the autumn chill. "Miss Sinclair? Are you in need of assistance?" Every instinct screamed yes, but Florence had spent 3 months learning exactly who held power in her guardian's web of lies, and she knew better than to trust a strange man's intervention, no matter how her traitorous body reacted to his presence. "I appreciate your concern, my lord, but this is a family matter." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those 2 dark eyes. Disappointment? Assessment? "As you wish." He inclined his head with perfect courtesy. "Lord Crane, do convey my regards to Dr. Croft at Briarwood. I'll be conducting an inspection of the facility later this week. The Parliament has questions about patient treatment protocols." The color drained from Reginald's face. The Baron turned and walked away, and Florence watched him go with a sick feeling of having just refused her only lifeline. Reginald's fingers dug into her arm again. "Get in the carriage, now." The asylum intake room smelled of carbolic soap and something sweeter underneath. Chloroform, maybe, or ether. Florence sat perfectly still on the wooden bench and counted the lies in the commitment document Dr. Croft had just signed. 7. No, 8, if she counted the date. Your guardian has outlined several concerning incidents, Dr. Croft said, not quite meeting her eyes. He was younger than she'd expected, with ink-stained fingers and the nervous energy of a man in over his head. Delusions, violent outbursts, and inappropriate behavior with members of the household staff. None of which happened. Florence kept her voice level, reasonable. Dr. Croft, if you check the date on that document against the calendar, you'll find I was supposedly admitted here on a Tuesday. But Lord Crane didn't petition for commitment until Wednesday morning. Rather difficult to assess a patient before she arrives, wouldn't you say? His pen stilled. And the signature at the bottom, allegedly from Dr. Marlowe, uses his new seal, the one he didn't commission until after my father's death. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. I'm not mad, doctor, but my guardian needs me declared unfit so he can access my inheritance through the marriage contract. He's using you. The question is whether you're being paid well enough to risk your license when Baron Ravencroft's inspection uncovers the discrepancies. Dr. Croft's face went white. That's quite an accusation. It's quite a lot of evidence. Florence held his gaze. And Ravencroft mentioned he'd be here this week, didn't he? Parliamentary inquiry. Very thorough, very public. Miss Sinclair. The door opened. An orderly appeared, broad-shouldered and blank-faced. Dr. Croft. Lord Crane is asking about the treatment schedule. Florence's stomach dropped. Treatment. That meant restraints, cold baths, forced medication, anything that would make her incoherent enough to sign away her rights. Dr. Croft stood, gathering his papers with shaking hands. I'll need to consult with— You'll need to decide, Florence interrupted. Whether you're a physician or an accomplice. He fled. The orderly remained in the doorway, watching her with dead eyes. Florence made herself breathe slowly, evenly. She'd bought herself time by mentioning Ravencroft's inspection, but time wasn't freedom, and Reginald wouldn't wait long. She needed to get word out. To her father's solicitor, maybe, or— The orderly stepped aside as new footsteps approached. Heavy, confident, the kind of tread that expected doors to open and people to move. Baron Ravencroft appeared in the doorway, and every nerve in Florence's body went tight. He looked different than he had at the ball, more dangerous. He'd shed the veneer of polite society like a coat, and what remained was something barely contained. When he spoke, his voice was cold enough to frost glass. Out. The orderly scrambled to obey. A Ravencroft closed the door behind him and leaned against it, arms crossed. For a long moment, he just stared at her with those unreadable dark eyes. You refused my help, he said finally. Why? Florence's mind raced. This man had known exactly how to threaten Reginald, which meant he knew about Briarwood's irregularities, which meant he either had leverage or agenda. Because I don't know what you want, she said carefully. And in my experience, powerful men don't offer assistance without expecting payment. His mouth curved, but it wasn't quite a smile. Smart girl. Woman, he corrected, without missing a beat. Who's apparently clever enough to spot forged documents and bribed physicians, yet stupid enough to publicly humiliate herself at the Pemberton ball. That wasn't stupidity, and it was strategy. Explain. It wasn't a request. Florence bristled at the command in his voice, but she needed information more than she needed pride. The blood contract requires I marry Lord Pemberton with sound mind and willing consent. If I'm deemed hysterical or unfit, the contract is void. No marriage, no legal transfer of my inheritance. Except your guardian anticipated that move and had you committed instead. Ravencroft pushed off the door and prowled closer. Now he controls your treatment, your testimony, and your legal standing. Within a month, you'll be sedated into compliance or deemed permanently unfit. Either way, he wins. The casual accuracy of his assessment sent ice through her veins. You seem remarkably well informed about my situation. My lord. I make it my business to know when predators operate in my territory. He stopped directly in front of her bench, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. And Lord Crane has been operating here for far too long. Something in his tone made her pulse kick. What territory? The relevant kind. His gaze dropped to her throat, lingered there. Tell me, Miss Sinclair, that performance at the ball, The wolves you claim to see. Why wolves specifically? Because I could smell you across the room, and my body knew what you were before my mind caught up, Florence thought, but absolutely did not say. Wolves are creatures of instinct, she said instead. Efficient predators. I thought the metaphor was apt. Apt. He repeated the word like he was tasting it. Art, you're either exceptionally perceptive or dangerously reckless. Can't I be both? This time his smile was real, sharp as broken glass. Miss Sinclair, I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and I expect precise answers. Do you understand? She nodded. First, are you working with anyone? Hunters, researchers, any organization with particular interest in unusual phenomena? No. Second, did you know what I was when you mentioned wolves at the ball? Her heart hammered. I suspected you were something other than human. I didn't know what until just now. His eyes flashed, literally flashed, amber bleeding through dark brown. And third, if I offered you a way out of this asylum and away from Lord Crane's control, what would you be willing to trade for it? That depends entirely on what you're asking for. Honest answers, absolute discretion, and your skills. My skills? You spotted inconsistencies in forged documents within minutes of seeing them. You read Dr. Croft well enough to know exactly how to unsettle him. You understand leverage. Ravencroft braced one hand on the wall beside her head, caging her in without quite touching. I need someone who can navigate human institutions and legal systems well enough to identify threats before they become problems. Someone who can think 3 moves ahead and lie convincingly when necessary. Florence's breath came shorter. From fear or proximity, she couldn't tell. And in exchange, protection, resources, legal assistance to void the marriage contract and reclaim your inheritance. His voice dropped lower. And a leash on Lord Crane that ensures he never touches you again. It was everything she needed, yet which meant the price would be catastrophic. You're not rescuing me out of altruism, she said. What do you really want? For the first time, something like respect crossed his face. You're either bait or an asset, Miss Sinclair. I haven't decided which yet. But either way, you're safer under my roof than in Lord Crane's cage. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting tonight. He straightened, putting professional distance between them again. The absence of his nearness felt like cold water. I'm offering you a choice. Stay here and let Crane drug you into compliance, or come with me to Ravencroft Estate and help me dismantle him. Properly, permanently, on paper and in the eyes of the law. Florence's mind spun through possibilities. Ravencroft was dangerous, that much was obvious. But Reginald was a known threat. And the asylum walls were closing in. If I agree, she said slowly, I want conditions. His eyebrow lifted. Bold. Pragmatic. First, I want access to legal counsel. Real counsel, not someone you control. Done. My solicitor is irritatingly independent. Second, I want limits on my confinement. If I'm trading one cage for another, you'll have freedom of the estate and grounds, Ravencroft interrupted, with supervision for your own safety until Crane's reach is neutralized. Third, I want a clear path to reclaiming my name and legal standing. Whatever I help you with, it can't destroy my reputation beyond repair. He studied her for a long moment. Anything else? Yes. Florence stood, bringing them nearly chest to chest. She had to look up to maintain eye contact, but she refused to back down. If I discover you're using me the way Crane did, as a pawn instead of a person, our agreement ends immediately. I don't care about your power or your territory. I will not be owned. The air between them went electric. His pupils dilated, and she caught that wild scent again, pine and smoke, and something that made her skin prickle with awareness. Miss Sinclair, he said, voice rough, I have absolutely no interest in owning you. Then we have an agreement, my lord. He extended his hand. We have an agreement. Florence took it. His palm was warm, his grip careful despite obvious strength. The moment their skin touched, something slammed through her, heat and recognition and a bone-deep certainty that terrified her. Ravencroft's jaw tightened. He felt it too. One more thing, he said, not releasing her hand. When we leave this room, but you follow my lead, no arguments, no improvisation. Crane will try to stop us, and I need you to trust that I won't let him. Why should I trust you? His smile was all teeth. Because unlike every other man you've dealt with, Miss Sinclair, I actually need you functional. The carriage ride to Ravencroft Estate took 2 hours through fog-thick countryside. Florence sat across from the Baron, acutely aware of every shift in his weight, every time his gaze flickered toward her in the darkness. He hadn't spoken since they'd left Briarwood, just handed her into the carriage with that same careful grip and settled into the opposite seat, like a man accustomed to long silences. Florence broke first. Dr. Croft let us leave rather easily. I made it worth his while. Ravencroft's voice came from the shadows. I then reminded him that falsified commitment papers carry criminal penalties. You didn't pay him off, you threatened him. I gave him a choice, same as I gave you. His eyes caught the lamplight, reflecting amber for just a heartbeat. He made the smart decision. And if I'd refused your offer, then I would have found another way to get you out. He said it like a simple fact. Lord Crane operates in my territory. That makes his crimes my concern. There it was again, that word, territory. Florence filed it away with all the other questions stacking up in her mind. How many, she asked. How many what? How many of you are there, in your territory? A pause. Then, enough. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting tonight. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Even in the dim carriage interior, his presence was overwhelming. But since we're asking questions, Miss Sinclair, that moment at the ball when you caught my scent, you knew immediately, didn't you? Florence's throat went dry. I knew you weren't fully human, yet you still performed your wolf speech, either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless. Yes, you've mentioned. She met his stare. I didn't have many options, my lord. The contract required willing consent and sound mind. I chose to destroy one of those variables. By claiming to see wolves. By claiming to see the truth. She smoothed her skirts, a nervous gesture she immediately regretted. I didn't expect anyone at that ball to actually be, she stopped. What should I call you? What you are? Careful, his voice dropped to a growl. Some questions have dangerous answers. You're asking me to work with you. I need to know what I'm working with. For a long moment, he just watched her. Then, shifter. Werewolf, if you prefer the old terminology. Alpha of the pack that controls this territory and 3 counties beyond it. Alpha King, Florence said, remembering the way the orderly had scrambled at his command. That's what the servants whispered when you walked through Briarwood. His mouth curved. You listen well. I survive well. There's a difference. The carriage wheels hit rougher road, and Florence gripped the seat to steady herself. Through the window, she caught glimpses of dense forest pressing close, black pines and twisted oaks that looked older than the road itself. We're entering Packlands, Ravencroft said. You'll feel it. Feel what? The boundary, it's... The air changed. Florence gasped as something invisible slid across her skin. Not quite touch, not quite scent, but a bone-deep awareness that she'd crossed from one world into another. Every hair on her arm stood up. What was that? Pack magic. Territory marker. He watched her reaction with unsettling focus. Most humans can't sense it at all. I'm human. Are you certain? The question landed like a stone in deep water. Florence opened her mouth, closed it. She'd never had reason to doubt her own nature before, but the way her body had responded to him at the ball, the way the boundary marker had felt like recognition instead of intrusion. I've never shifted, she said carefully. Never had. Heightened senses or anything beyond normal. That you know of. Ravencroft settled back against the seat. We'll find out soon enough. The estate has ways of revealing what people would rather keep hidden. Ravencroft Estate rose from the moorland like something out of a Gothic nightmare. All dark stone and pointed towers, with forest pressing close on 3 sides, and formal gardens that had gone half wild. Gas lamps flickered in the windows, but they didn't make the house look welcoming. They made it look watched. Florence stepped from the carriage and immediately caught scents she couldn't name. Smoke and pine and fir, yes, but underneath, blood and earth and something that made her instincts scream both danger and safety in the same breath. This way. Ravencroft's hand settled at the small of her back, guiding her up the steps. Even through her traveling cloak and dress, his touch burned. The front door opened before they reached it. A woman stood in the entrance, 50-odd iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun, dressed in black bombazine with a chatelaine of keys at her waist. Her eyes were the same amber-flecked brown as Ravencroft's. "Mrs. Weatherby," Ravencroft said. "This is Miss Florence Sinclair. She'll be staying in the East Wing under pack protection." The housekeeper's gaze raked over Florence with predatory assessment. "The asylum girl." "The woman Lord Crane tried to cage," Ravencroft corrected, voice hard. "She's under my authority now. See that the staff understands." Mrs. Weatherby's expression didn't change, but she inclined her head. "Of course, my lord. I've prepared the rose room. It has sturdy locks. Inside and out, and I assume? Naturally." Florence's stomach dropped. "I thought you said I'd have freedom of the estate." "You will," Ravencroft said. "Once we're certain Crane doesn't have anyone in the household feeding him information. Until then, the locks are for your protection. Or my containment. Both." He turned to face her fully. "Miss Sinclair, I pulled you from an asylum where your guardian had every intention of drugging you into submission. He's not going to accept that loss quietly. Until we've secured your legal position and neutralized his reach, you're a target. The locks keep threats out. And me in, if necessary," and his honesty was almost refreshing. "Do you want to be safe, or do you want to be free? Because right now you can't have both." Florence looked at Mrs. Weatherby's impassive face, and then at the grand entrance hall behind her, all dark wood and ancestral portraits, and the unmistakable sense of being in someone else's territory. Another cage, just a more gilded one. "Fine," she said. "But I want that legal counsel you promised. Tomorrow. His name is Edwin Ashcombe. He'll be here at 9. Ravencroft gestured toward the stairs. "Mrs. Weatherby will show you to your room. Get some rest. We have work to do in the morning." He walked away before Florence could respond, disappearing through a side door with that same predatory grace. Mrs. Weatherby cleared her throat. "This way, miss." The rose room was beautiful and terrible. Silk wallpaper, a 4-poster bed with velvet curtains, a writing desk positioned by tall windows that overlooked the gardens. And yes, heavy locks on both sides of the door. "Our breakfast is at 7, Mrs. Weatherby said, setting a lamp on the bedside table. "You're to remain in your room until the Baron sends for you. If you require anything, ring the bell. Someone will attend." "Someone who reports back to Lord Ravencroft?" The housekeeper's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Everyone in this house reports to the Baron, miss. But if you're asking whether I'll spy on your private moments, the answer is no. We're not savages. Just wolves. Just family." Mrs. Weatherby moved toward the door, then paused. "A word of advice, Miss Sinclair. The Baron is a hard man, but he's a fair one. He protects what's his, and he destroys what threatens his pack. You'd do well to remember which category you fall into." "And which do you think that is?" "I think," Mrs. Weatherby said slowly, "that you're the first person in a very long time who's negotiated with him instead of obeying. That makes you either very brave or very stupid. We'll find out which soon enough." She left, and the lock clicked from the outside. Florence sank onto the bed and let herself shake. She woke to someone unlocking her door. Dawnlight filtered through the curtains, barely 6 o'clock. Florence sat up, heart pounding, as a young maid entered with a breakfast tray. "Begging your pardon, miss." The girl couldn't have been more than 16, with nervous hands and downcast eyes. "The Baron requests your presence in his study at 7. Mrs. Weatherby sent proper clothing." She gestured to a dress draped over the chair, deep green wool, severely practical, with none of the fussy trim Florence's own wardrobe favored. Where are my clothes?" "Being cleaned, miss. You'll have them back by tonight." The maid set down the tray and fled before Florence could ask anything else. The breakfast was generous: eggs, toast, jam, tea, but Florence's appetite had vanished. She dressed quickly, noting that the green wool fit suspiciously well. Had Ravencroft guessed her measurements, or did he simply keep a wardrobe of appropriate sizes for unexpected female guests? Neither option was comforting. At precisely 7, the lock clicked again. A man stood in the doorway, mid-30s, broad-shouldered, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow and the kind of watchful stillness that marked soldiers or predators. "Miss Sinclair, I'm Captain Silas Ward." His voice was gravel and smoke. "The Baron's asked me to escort you to his study." "How courteous." His mouth twitched. "It's not courtesy, it's procedure. There are parts of this house you shouldn't wander into alone." "Why? What's in them?" "Answers you're not ready for." He stepped back, gesturing toward the corridor. "After you." Florence walked past him and immediately felt the weight of his attention on her back. He moved like Ravencroft, too quiet, too controlled, and she'd bet money his eyes did the same amber flash trick. The study was on the ground floor, down a corridor lined with hunting trophies that made Florence's skin crawl. Silas knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for acknowledgement. Ravencroft sat behind a massive oak desk covered in papers, ledgers, and what looked like property maps. He'd traded last night's formal coat for shirt sleeves and a waistcoat, and in the casual intimacy of seeing him partially undressed, made Florence's pulse stutter. He looked up. "Miss Sinclair, punctual. Good. I didn't have much choice. You always have choices." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Silas, wait outside." The captain hesitated. "My lord." "She's not going to gut me with a letter opener, Silas. Out." Silas left, but his disapproval hung in the air like smoke. Ravencroft pushed a folder across the desk. "Before the solicitor arrives, I need you to review these documents. Lord Crane's petition for permanent guardianship. Tell me what's wrong with them." Florence opened the folder and scanned the first page, then the second. By the third, her blood had gone cold. "This petition claims I attempted suicide at Briarwood," she said quietly. "That I'm a danger to myself and others. That requires witness testimony from medical staff, which Dr. Croft never provided because you weren't there long enough." Ravencroft leaned back in his chair. "Keep going." She turned pages, her mind cataloging discrepancies with ruthless focus. "The dates don't align. This references a psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Marlowe dated 4 days ago. But Dr. Marlowe is in London until next week. I saw his calendar when I visited his office last month about my father's medical records." "Anything else?" "The property clause." Florence tapped the paragraph. "It states that upon my permanent commitment, administration of my estate transfers to Lord Crane as acting guardian, but only if there's no male heir to contest. My father had a cousin in Edinburgh. Lord Crane would need his signature to execute this." Ravencroft's expression shifted. As satisfaction, maybe, or the predatory pleasure of watching prey prove itself useful. "Malcolm Sinclair," he said. "Your father's cousin. He died 3 weeks ago. Convenient timing." Florence's stomach turned. "You think Reginald—" "I think," Ravencroft interrupted, "that your guardian is remarkably good at removing obstacles, whether through legal maneuvering or more permanent solutions." He stood, moving to the window. "Which brings us to the real question, Miss Sinclair. You've just proven you're valuable. You see patterns, spot inconsistencies, and understand how documents can be weaponized. So tell me, what would you do if you were in Crane's position right now?" It was a test. Florence recognized it immediately, not a question but an interview. The kind where wrong answers had consequences. She closed the folder and met his gaze. "How if I were Reginald? I'd move fast. You extracted me from Briarwood using your authority, which means he knows you're involved. He'll assume you're either romantically interested or using me for leverage. Either way, I'm a threat to his plans. Go on." He'll try to discredit you while simultaneously pushing for emergency custody. He'll claim you're unfit to shelter me, that you're compromised, possibly dangerous. He'll want a magistrate's order to remove me from your estate. Smart. Ravencroft turned from the window. What else? He'll spread rumors that I'm your mistress, or that you've taken advantage of a vulnerable woman. Society scandal to undermine your credibility. Florence stood, pacing now as her mind worked. And if legal routes fail, he'll resort to more direct methods, such as abduction, staged accident, and something that puts me back under his control before I can testify or produce evidence against him. Ravencroft's smile was sharp as knives. Excellent. Now, knowing all that, what's our move? Our move, not his. The shift in pronoun wasn't accidental. We go on offense, Florence said. Stop reacting and start controlling the narrative. File a counter-petition questioning the guardianship appointment itself. Demand an independent review of my father's death and the contract circumstances. Force Reginald to defend his position instead of attacking mine. And we find Malcolm Sinclair's death certificate. If there's anything irregular about his passing, it's another thread to pull. Ravencroft crossed the study in 3 strides and extended his hand. Miss Sinclair, I believe we're going to work very well together. She shook it, as in that same electric awareness slammed through her, stronger now, more insistent. His fingers tightened fractionally before he released her. I'll have Silas retrieve the Edinburgh records, he said, voice rougher than before. Ashcombe should be here within the hour. You'll brief him on everything you've found, and he'll begin drafting the counter-petition. What will you be doing? Ensuring Lord Crane understands that stealing from my territory has consequences. His eyes flashed amber. This is the part where you trust me, Miss Sinclair. Or the part where I demand specifics about what consequences means. You really don't know when to stop pushing, do you? Would you respect me if I did? His laugh was low and startled. No, I absolutely wouldn't. Edwin Ashcombe arrived at 9 precisely, carrying a leather satchel and an expression of permanent disapproval. He was thin as a rail, mid-40s, with silver spectacles and ink-stained fingers. Miss Sinclair, he didn't offer to shake hands. I've reviewed the preliminary documents Lord Ravencroft provided. Your situation is legally complicated and socially catastrophic. How reassuring. I deal in reality, not reassurance. He set his satchel on the desk and began unpacking papers. The blood contract is enforceable under current law, provided both parties entered willingly and with sound mind. Your public breakdown at the Pemberton Ball complicates the sound mind provision, which I assume was your intent. It was. Clever, reckless, but clever. He pushed his spectacles up his nose. However, Lord Crane's commitment petition creates a secondary problem. And if a magistrate declares you permanently unfit, you lose legal standing to contest any contract or guardianship arrangement. You become, essentially, property. Florence's hands clenched. So what's our counter-strategy? We challenge the guardianship appointment itself. Ashcombe pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. Your father's will named Lord Crane as guardian only until your 21st birthday or marriage, whichever came first. You turned 21 4 months ago. The room tilted. What? You're legally an adult, Miss Sinclair. The guardianship should have dissolved automatically on your birthday. The fact that Lord Crane continued to exercise authority suggests he's either ignorant of the law, which I doubt, or deliberately concealing your legal majority. Why would he? Florence stopped, the answer clicking into place. At the inheritance, it transfers on my 21st birthday only if I'm unmarried and of sound mind. If I'm married, it transfers to my husband. If I'm deemed unfit, it remains in guardianship. Precisely. Ashcombe's smile was thin and satisfied, which means Lord Crane has been operating under false pretenses for 4 months. That's fraud, Miss Sinclair. Actionable, career-destroying fraud. Hope flared, sharp and painful. Can you prove it? With your father's original will and your birth certificate, yes. Do you know where either document is currently held? Reginald keeps all the family papers at Crane Hall. Florence's mind raced. But there should be copies filed with the courts or your firm, or... I'll begin inquiries immediately. Ashcombe started making notes. In the meantime, you'll need to remain here under Lord Ravencroft's protection. If Lord Crane discovers we're building a case, he'll escalate. He's already escalating, Ravencroft said from the doorway. Florence hadn't heard him enter. A courier arrived 10 minutes ago. Crane's filed for emergency custody, claiming Miss Sinclair was abducted from lawful medical care. Florence's stomach dropped. How long do we have? The magistrate's clerk scheduled a hearing for tomorrow afternoon. Ravencroft's voice was deadly calm. 3 o'clock at the county court. That's barely 24 hours, Ashcombe snapped. Insufficient time to prepare adequate defense. Then we don't defend. Ravencroft looked at Florence. We attack. You said it yourself, go on offense. Tomorrow, We expose Crane's fraud in open court and force the magistrate to rule on the guardianship itself. With what evidence? Florence demanded. We don't have the will or my birth records yet. We have you. Ravencroft's gaze held hers. Your testimony about the forged commitment papers, Dr. Croft's reluctance to cooperate with Crane's timeline, the inconsistencies in the guardianship petition, and most importantly, your demonstration of clear, rational thought. They'll say I'm performing, that I've been coached. Let them. His smile was sharp. Because the more they claim you're manipulative and calculating, the less they can claim you're hysterical and unfit. Crane can't have it both ways. Ashcombe adjusted his spectacles. It's risky. If the magistrate sides with Lord Crane, he won't. Ravencroft's certainty was absolute. Not after I remind him how much his estate's timber contracts depend on my goodwill. Florence's breath caught. That's politics, Ravencroft finished. Welcome to how power actually works, Miss Sinclair. The attack came at sunset. Florence was in the library with Ashcombe, reviewing testimony strategies, when glass shattered in the entrance hall. She heard Mrs. Weatherby shout. Then Silas's voice raised in command. Stay here, Ashcombe hissed, moving toward the door. Florence ignored him. She grabbed a letter opener from the desk and followed, her heart slamming against her ribs. The entrance hall was chaos. 3 men in rough workman's clothes had forced their way past the footmen. One of them held a club, another a knife. The third carried a length of rope. Miss Sinclair, the one with the rope, spotted her on the stairs. Lord Crane sends his regards. You're coming with us. Silas moved to intercept, but the man with the club swung at him, a vicious arc that would have cracked his skull if Silas hadn't been inhumanly fast. He ducked, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted. Bone snapped. The man screamed. Florence, Ravencroft's voice, sharp as a whip crack. He appeared from the side corridor, and the temperature in the hall plummeted. Get back upstairs, now. She couldn't move. The man with the rope was climbing toward her, grinning. You heard Lord Crane's orders, didn't you, pet? Said you might need persuading. He grabbed for her arm. Florence drove the letter opener into his hand. He howled, jerking back, and that's when everything went wrong. The man with the knife lunged at Ravencroft, not to wound, to kill. And something in Ravencroft's control just shattered. The sound that came from his throat wasn't human. The air around him rippled, and Florence watched in horrified fascination as his body changed. Bones cracked and reformed, muscles twisted, and fur erupted across his skin in a wave of silver dark. His clothes tore, his face elongated into a muzzle full of teeth that gleamed in the lamplight. In less than 3 seconds, where Baron Lucian Ravencroft had stood, there was a wolf the size of a cart horse. The attackers froze. The wolf's eyes, still amber, still his, fixed on the man with the knife. A growl rumbled through the hall, so deep Florence felt it in her bones. The wolf moved forward, slow and deliberate, and the man stumbled backward with a choked sound of pure terror. But please, I was just following orders. The wolf lunged. Florence closed her eyes, bracing for the sound of tearing flesh, but it didn't come. Instead, she heard a crash, a scream, and then Silas's voice. Stand down, he's yielding. She opened her eyes. The wolf had the man pinned to the floor, one massive paw on his chest, jaws inches from his throat. But he wasn't biting, just holding him there, trapped and helpless. The other 2 attackers were already fleeing through the broken door. Slowly, the wolf's gaze swung toward Florence. She should have been terrified. Every rational instinct screamed at her to run. But instead, she found herself walking down the stairs, one careful step at a time, until she stood just feet away from him. Lucian, she said softly. The wolf's ears flicked forward. Let him go. We need him alive to testify. For a long, tense moment, nothing happened. And then the wolf stepped back, releasing the sobbing man into Silas's custody. And the air rippled again. This time, Florence watched the whole transformation, fur receding, bones cracking back into human shape. The massive wolf form condensing into a naked man kneeling on the marble floor. Mrs. Weatherby appeared with a cloak. She draped it over Ravencroft's shoulders without comment, and he stood, wrapping it around himself with shaking hands. His eyes found Florence's. Are you hurt? No, her voice came out steadier than she expected. Are you? I'm fine. But he didn't look fine. He looked furious and shaken, and something else she couldn't name. You were supposed to stay in the library. He was going to abduct me. Like I wasn't going to make it easy. You stabbed him with a letter opener. It seemed appropriate. Florence realized she was still holding the bloody thing. She set it carefully on the hall table. Is he going to live? Unfortunately. Ravencroft's jaw, no, she couldn't reference Jaws. His mouth tightened. Silas, get him secured. I want names, employer details, and anything else he knows about Crane's plans. Use whatever methods necessary. My lord! Silas hauled the man toward the cellars. Silence fell. Florence and Ravencroft stared at each other across the ruined entrance hall. So, she said, finally. That's what you meant by consequences. Florence, you shifted. She couldn't keep the wonder from her voice. I've read about it in old texts, but seeing it, feeling it. She shook her head. You're terrifying. I know. And magnificent. His expression cracked. What? You heard me. Florence stepped closer, ignoring Mrs. Weatherby's sharp intake of breath. You could have killed him. You should have, probably. He was trying to kill you, but you stopped. You held him for testimony instead. That doesn't make me less dangerous. No, Florence agreed. But it makes you more than just a monster, and that's what matters. The air between them went electric again. That same pull, that same impossible awareness. Ravencroft's pupils dilated, and she caught his scent even through the blood and chaos. Pine and smoke and something wild that called to a part of her she'd never acknowledged. You should be afraid of me, he said roughly. I'm afraid of you. Florence held his gaze. I'm also grateful. I'm furious that Reginald sent men to drag me away like property. And impressed by your restraint. I'm capable of holding multiple truths at once, my lord. His hand lifted, as if to touch her face, then dropped. Go upstairs. Get cleaned up. We'll debrief once I'm presentable. Lucian? Please? The word sounded like it cost him. I need a moment. Florence nodded and turned toward the stairs. But halfway up, she looked back. He was still standing there, wrapped in the cloak, watching her with an expression that made her heart stutter. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I'm glad you're the one who found me, and not just because you're useful. She didn't wait for his response, but as she climbed the stairs, she heard his voice, barely a whisper. So am I. An hour later, Florence sat in the Rose Room with a cup of tea she couldn't drink. Her hands had finally stopped shaking, but her mind kept replaying the attack, the violence, the shift. The moment Lucian's wolf eyes had met hers, she should be terrified, should be packing her few belongings and demanding to leave. Instead, all she could think was, he protected me. He could have killed them, but he didn't, because I asked him not to. A knock at the door. Miss Sinclair? It's the Baron. Florence opened the door. Lucian stood there, fully dressed now in clean clothes, his dark hair still damp from washing. He looked exhausted and edgy and completely in control. May I come in? She stepped back and he entered, leaving the door open, propriety maintained even now. The man Silas questioned, Lucian said, without preamble. His name is Jacob Finch. Crane hired him and 2 others to retrieve you by any means necessary. He was promised £200 and assured there would be no legal consequences, because Reginald planned to have me declared unfit before anyone could question it. Exactly. Lucian moved to the window, staring out at the darkening grounds. I've sent word to the magistrate. Finch's testimony, combined with the attack itself, should be enough to prove Crane's malicious intent. Should be. Law and justice aren't always the same thing, Florence. He turned to face her. Which is why tomorrow in court, you need to be perfect, calm, rational, articulate. Show them the woman who negotiated with me, not the one who laughed about wolves at the Pemberton ball. I can do that. I know you can. His gaze held hers. But there's something else we need to discuss. And what you saw tonight. You shifted. Yes. And under PAC law, that should make you a security risk. Witnesses to the transformation are usually... He stopped. Usually what? Killed? Silenced? Brought into the PAC? Or bound by other means? Lucian's voice went rough. But you're neither packed nor bound, and I won't force either on you, which means I'm trusting you with a secret that could destroy everything I've built. Florence's breath caught. Why? Because you asked me not to kill them, and I listened. He crossed the room, stopping just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. Because you looked at my wolf and called it magnificent instead of monstrous. Because you're the first person in years who's treated me like a man instead of a weapon. Lucien? And because, he continued, and voice dropping to barely above a whisper, the Bond recognized you the moment I walked into that ballroom. And everything I've done since then, extracting you from Briarwood, sheltering you here, risking pack exposure, none of it has been entirely logical. The admission hung between them like a live wire. The bond, Florence repeated. The mate bond. That's what this is. Yes. And you're telling me this now because tomorrow in court, Crane will try to paint me as compromised, as a predator who took advantage of you, and he won't be entirely wrong. Lucien's hands clenched at his sides. I want you to have the choice I never gave you before. After we defeat Crane, after your inheritance is secure and your name is clear, you can walk away. I'll ensure your safety and your freedom. No strings, no bond, like no obligation. Florence stared at him, at this powerful, dangerous man offering her the one thing no one else ever had, a real choice. And if I don't want to walk away, his control cracked. Just for a second, she saw raw hunger in his eyes. Then we have a very different conversation. I see. Florence stepped closer, testing the boundaries. And until then, we're allies, partners, nothing more. He said it like a vow. I won't take advantage of the bond or the situation. You have my word. Even though you want to. Especially because I want to. His voice was strained. Florence, I've spent my entire life controlling the wolf. I won't let myself lose control with you. She believed him, and that belief, more than anything else, made her take the final step forward, close enough to touch, close enough to feel his breath hitch. Thank you, she said softly, for the honesty, for the choice, for not making me into another thing you own. Never, the word was fierce. You're not property, Florence, not to me, not to anyone. She lifted her hand and placed it carefully over his heart, felt it hammering against her palm. His hand covered hers, holding it there. We should stop. We're not doing anything. This feels like doing something. It feels like trust. Florence met his gaze. Tomorrow we go to war with Reginald. Tonight, I need to know you're on my side, not because of duty or territory or pack law, but because you choose to be. I choose you, Lucien said roughly. I have since the moment you negotiated terms in that asylum room, and I'll keep choosing you until you tell me to stop. For a long moment, they just stood there, her hand over his heart, his covering hers, the bond singing between them like a taut string. Then Lucien stepped back, carefully removing her hand. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. He left before she could respond. Florence touched her palm, where the warmth of him still lingered, and knew with absolute certainty that nothing about tomorrow would be simple. But for the first time since her father died, she wasn't facing it alone. Florence woke before dawn to find a note slipped under her door. Court at 3, wear the gray silk. It makes you look like a governess, respectable, forgettable. Exactly what we need. L. She dressed carefully in the gray silk Mrs. Weatherby had provided, pinning her hair into a severe knot that made her look older, more composed. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Good. The hysterical girl from the Pemberton ball had vanished, replaced by someone who looked capable of surviving a legal battle. Breakfast arrived with the same nervous maid. This time, Florence stopped her before she could flee. What's your name? The girl startled. Sarah, miss. Sarah, has anyone asked you questions about me? About what I do in this room, or what I've said? Sarah's eyes went wide. No, miss. Mrs. Weatherby said we're not to gossip about guests. It's pack law. Pack law, Florence repeated. You're one of them, a shifter. Yes, miss. Sarah dropped her gaze. My family's been with the Ravencroft pack for 3 generations. We're loyal. I'm not questioning your loyalty, as I'm trying to understand how many people in this household might be vulnerable to outside pressure or bribery. Sarah's chin lifted slightly. None, miss. Pack bonds don't break for money. Lord Crane could offer us a fortune, and we'd spit in his face. The fierce certainty in her voice made Florence believe her. Thank you, Sarah. That's good to know. After Sarah left, Florence reviewed her testimony notes one final time. Ashcombe had drilled her for hours yesterday on what to say, how to say it, when to pause for effect. But the real challenge would be staying calm under Reginald's inevitable attacks. A knock. It's Silas. The Baron wants you in his study. Lucian stood by the window, already dressed for court in severe black with a silver waistcoat. He looked every inch the powerful Baron, controlled, dangerous, are absolutely certain of his authority. You look perfect, he said without turning. Exactly like a woman who couldn't possibly be unfit. Thank you, I think. He finally looked at her, and something flickered in his expression. The prisoner talked. Finch gave us names, dates, payments. Reginald's been planning your commitment for at least 6 weeks, since before the engagement announcement. Florence's stomach dropped. 6 weeks? That means he knew I'd refuse the marriage? Or he planned to force it regardless? Lucian crossed to his desk and handed her a folder. Ashcombe found something else. Your cousin Malcolm's death certificate. The physician who signed it was the same Dr. Marlowe who supposedly evaluated you for hysteria. Florence scanned the document, her mind cataloging discrepancies automatically. The date's wrong. This says Malcolm died on the 15th, but the petition to probate his will wasn't filed until the 23rd. That's 8 days. Scottish law requires filing within 5 days of death for estates of that size. Which suggests either the death certificate is backdated, or someone deliberately delayed the probate filing. Florence looked up. Why would Reginald need Malcolm dead before the guardianship petition? Unless Malcolm was planning to contest the guardianship itself, Lucian finished. He knew about your 21st birthday. He knew the guardianship should have dissolved. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Reginald killed him, or had him killed. We can't prove it yet, but the timing is damning. Lucian's voice was hard. And it gives us another weapon for court. Reasonable doubt about Crane's motives and methods. Will the magistrate care about suspicions? Magistrate Whitmore cares about appearing impartial, which means if we create enough doubt, enough scandal, he'll be forced to delay the custody decision and order a full investigation. Lucian moved closer. That delay is our victory, Florence. It buys time to find your father's original will and build the fraud case properly. And if Reginald has already destroyed the will, then we find another way. His hand lifted, almost touching her face, then dropped, exactly like last night. The restraint in the gesture made her chest ache. You're not alone in this fight. I know. Florence held his gaze. Lucian, after today, after court, if we win the delay, what happens to me? Do I stay here? If you want to. His voice roughened. I see, but staying here means more risk. Crane won't stop just because a magistrate told him to. He'll escalate. Let him escalate. I'm tired of running and hiding and performing madness to survive. Florence stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I want to fight back. I want to destroy him the way he tried to destroy me. Something fierce and approving flashed in Lucian's eyes. Careful, Florence. You're starting to sound like Pack. Maybe that's not such a terrible thing. The air between them went electric. That same pull, that same impossible heat. Lucian's pupils dilated, and Florence caught his scent. Pine and smoke, and once so sharp it made her breath stutter. We should go, he said roughly. The carriage is waiting, but neither of them moved. Lucian. If I kiss you right now, he interrupted, our voice barely above a whisper, I won't stop, and we have a battle to win first. The promise in those words sent heat pooling low in her belly. After the battle, then. After the battle, he agreed. If you still want me, I'll want you. Florence said it with absolute certainty. The question is whether you'll still want someone who brings this much chaos into your territory. His smile was sharp and beautiful. Florence, I've been waiting my entire life for someone brave enough to bring chaos. Don't disappoint me now. The county courthouse was packed. Florence spotted familiar faces from the Pemberton ball. Lady Honoria Vale in the front row, Lord Pemberton looking mortified, and several other society matrons who'd witnessed her performance, all of them watching with avid curiosity. Reginald sat at the petitioner's table with two solicitors, looking every inch the concerned guardian. When his gaze found Florence, his smile was pure poison. Magistrate Whitmore entered, and everyone rose. He was older than Florence expected, 70 at least, with shrewd eyes and the careful movements of a man who understood power. "Be seated," Whitmore arranged his papers. "This is an emergency hearing on the petition for permanent guardianship of Miss Florence Adelaide Sinclair. Lord Crane, present your case." Reginald's lead solicitor stood. "Your Honor, Miss Sinclair has demonstrated clear signs of mental instability and hysteria. Her public breakdown at the Pemberton ball, her bizarre claims about seeing wolves, and her recent violent behavior." "Violent behavior?" Ashcombe was on his feet. "It's what violent behavior? Miss Sinclair stabbed a man with a letter opener just last night, Your Honor. An unprovoked attack on a servant attempting to deliver a message from her concerned guardian." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Florence's hands clenched under the table. Clever. Reginald was spinning the attack as her madness, not his attempt at abduction. "Your Honor," Ashcombe said coldly, "that servant was part of an armed group who broke into Baron Ravencroft's estate with weapons and rope, threatening Miss Sinclair with abduction. She defended herself. The man in question is currently in custody and has confessed to being hired by Lord Crane specifically to retrieve Miss Sinclair by any means necessary. We have his signed testimony." Whitmore's eyebrows rose. "Is this true, Lord Crane?" Reginald's face flushed. "A misunderstanding, Your Honor. I was concerned for my ward's safety, given that she'd been removed from medical care without proper consent." "I gave consent," Florence said clearly. "I'm 21 years old, Your Honor. I am legally an adult." "You are mentally unfit," Reginald snapped, dropping the concerned guardian mask, "as evidenced by your hysterical performance at the Pemberton ball and your subsequent commitment to Briarwood House under physician's orders." "Commitment based on falsified documents," Ashcombe interjected. The intake papers were dated before Miss Sinclair arrived at the facility. The psychological evaluation was allegedly conducted by a physician who was in London at the time, and the commitment order was signed in violation of proper procedure. "These are serious allegations," Whitmore said slowly. "They're desperate lies," Reginald's solicitor countered, "concocted by Baron Ravencroft, who has obvious personal interest in Miss Sinclair. We have witnesses who will testify that the Baron has been inappropriately intimate with my client's ward." Florence's blood ran cold. This was the play she'd predicted: destroy Lucian's credibility by framing him as a predator. Lucian stood, and every eye in the courtroom turned to him. "Magistrate Whitmore, I'm happy to address any questions about my conduct. But first, I'd like to enter into evidence the signed confession of Jacob Finch, the man Lord Crane hired to abduct Miss Sinclair from my estate, along with bank records showing payments from Lord Crane to Mr. Finch, totaling £200. Ashcombe handed the documents to the magistrate's clerk. Whitmore scanned them, his expression growing darker. "Lord Crane, did you authorize payment to Mr. Finch?" "For legitimate purposes. Abduction is not a legitimate purpose." Whitmore's voice was ice. "And hiring armed men to retrieve a legal adult from protective custody borders on criminal conspiracy." "She's not a legal adult if she's mentally unfit." Reginald slammed his hand on the table. "That's the entire point of this hearing, Your Honor. She needs to be protected from herself and from men like Ravencroft, who would take advantage." "I'm not being taken advantage of," Florence interrupted, standing. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Whitmore studied her. "Proceed, Miss Sinclair." Florence took a breath and channeled every ounce of composure she possessed. "Your Honor, Lord Crane has controlled my life since my father's death 18 months ago. He controls my inheritance, my legal standing, and until recently, my freedom. When I turned 21 4 months ago, that guardianship should have dissolved by law. It didn't. When I attempted to question the blood contract Lord Crane arranged, a marriage contract allegedly signed by my late father, I was told I was being hysterical. When I tried to access family documents to verify signatures, I was denied. So yes, I performed madness at the Pemberton ball. It was the only tool I had left to invalidate a contract I never consented to. The courtroom was utterly silent. But that performance backfired, Florence continued. Instead of voiding the contract, it gave Lord Crane grounds to commit me, to silence me permanently under the guise of medical care. Baron Ravencroft extracted me from that facility because he recognized what was happening, not romance, not seduction, but institutional abuse masquerading as guardianship. Well spoken, Whitmore said. But Lord Crane raises a valid point. If you're mentally sound, why the elaborate performance? Why not simply contest the contract through proper legal channels? Because I tried, Your Honor. I consulted 3 solicitors. All of them told me the same thing. As a woman under guardianship, I had no legal standing to challenge my guardian's decisions. The only way to break free was to be declared unfit for the marriage itself. A calculated risk. A desperate gamble. Florence met his gaze. One that nearly cost me everything. Whitmore leaned back in his chair. Lord Crane, I'm inclined to delay this custody decision pending a full investigation into the guardianship arrangement and Miss Sinclair's legal majority. Additionally, Your Honor, if I may, Reginald's solicitor stood. We have one final piece of evidence, a clause in the original guardianship agreement that addresses precisely this situation. Ice flooded Florence's veins. The solicitor handed documents to the clerk. The guardianship agreement signed by Miss Sinclair's late father contains a provision allowing for extended guardianship in cases of mental or moral unfitness, regardless of age. Specifically, it grants Lord Crane authority to maintain guardianship until such time as Miss Sinclair is deemed suitable for marriage or independent living by qualified medical assessment. Let me see that. Ashcombe grabbed the document, scanned it, and went pale. Florence's world tilted. That's not possible. My father would never. Your father signed it 3 months before his death, Reginald said smoothly. He was concerned about your romantic attachments to unsuitable men. He wanted to ensure you'd be protected until you demonstrated proper judgment. It was a lie. It had to be a lie. But the document was there, physical and damning. Whitmore reviewed it carefully. This appears legitimate. If this clause is valid, Lord Crane's guardianship could indeed extend beyond Miss Sinclair's majority. The signature needs to be verified, Ashcombe said desperately. We need time to authenticate. I can authenticate it right now, Florence said. Everyone stared at her. Your Honor, may I approach? Whitmore nodded. Florence walked to the clerk's desk, took the document, and studied it with the same ruthless focus she'd used on every other forged paper Reginald had produced. The signature looked perfect. The ink was period appropriate. The language matched her father's formal style, but the date, she said quietly. This is supposedly signed March 15th, 3 months before my father's death. But the paper itself is wrong. Wrong how? Whitmore asked. My father used a specific stationer, Pembroke & Sons on Bond Street. They use a proprietary watermark. I've seen hundreds of documents in his hand. Florence held the paper up to the light. This paper has no watermark, which means it's not from Pembroke & Sons, which means my father didn't sign it. Reginald's face went white. Furthermore, Florence continued, her voice gaining strength, that my father's signature always included a small flourish on the S in Sinclair, a family affectation he never abandoned. This signature doesn't have that flourish. It's close, but it's not his hand. These are minor details, Reginald's solicitor protested. Hardly conclusive. They're exactly the kind of details a forger wouldn't know to include, Ashcombe interrupted. Your Honor, I request an immediate expert review of this document's authenticity. Whitmore stared at the paper for a long moment. Lord Crane, how did you come to possess this document? It was among my late friend's papers, kept in trust. Kept where specifically? Reginald hesitated. In my private safe. Not filed with the courts or your solicitor? It was a private family arrangement. How convenient. Whitmore set the document aside. Here is my ruling. And the emergency custody petition is denied pending a full investigation into the guardianship agreement, the authenticity of this so-called clause, and the circumstances surrounding Miss Sinclair's commitment to Briarwood House. Miss Sinclair will remain in Baron Ravencroft's protective custody, with weekly reports to this court on her well-being. Lord Crane, you are not to approach, contact, or communicate with Miss Sinclair in any way until this matter is resolved. Do you understand? Reginald's face was a mask of fury. Your Honor, do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Good. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. Dismissed. The courtroom erupted. Florence felt hands on her shoulders. Lucian, steadying her as her knees went weak. You did it, he said quietly. You destroyed his case in open court. We're not done yet. He'll... Apropos. Glass shattered. Florence registered the sound half a second before Lucian yanked her down behind the table. Screams filled the courtroom as more windows exploded inward. Stay down, Lucian commanded. His eyes had gone full amber. Through the chaos, Florence saw them. 5 men in rough clothes, armed with clubs and knives, forcing their way through the panicked crowd. And behind them, slipping toward the side exit, Reginald. He's running, Florence shouted. Let him run. Lucian's voice was barely human. Silas, Captain Ward materialized from the crowd, already moving to intercept the attackers. But there were too many, and they were targeting Florence specifically. One of them broke through, lunging at her with a knife. Lucian moved. The air rippled around him, but this time he fought the shift with visible strain. His hand shot out, catching the attacker's wrist and twisting with inhuman strength. Bones snapped. The man screamed and dropped, but another was already there, swinging a club at Lucian's head. Florence grabbed the fallen knife and drove it into the second attacker's thigh. He went down howling. We need to leave, Silas growled, appearing at their side. Now, before. The courtroom doors burst open. More men poured in, and Florence realized with sick certainty that this wasn't just an attack. It was an extraction attempt. Reginald was trying to take her by force in the chaos. He planned this, she said. He knew he'd lose in court. This was always the backup. Lucian's control was slipping. She could see it in the way his muscles tensed, the way his breathing changed. The wolf was rising, and in a room full of witnesses, that would destroy everything. Don't shift, Florence said urgently, gripping his arm. Lucian, look at me. If you shift here, in front of everyone, it's over. Reginald wins. His eyes, more amber than brown now, locked on hers. We run, she continued. We get out, regroup, and finish this properly, on our terms. For a terrible moment, she thought he'd lost control entirely. Then his hand found hers, gripping tight. Together, he said roughly. We run together. Silas cleared a path to the side door. They ran. They made it to the carriage, but barely. Lucian's driver, another pack member, Florence assumed, had the horses moving before they'd fully climbed inside. Florence collapsed against the seat, her heart slamming against her ribs. Across from her, Lucian was shaking with the effort of maintaining control. How close was that, she asked. Too close. His voice was gravel. Another 30 seconds, and I would have shifted in front of the entire courtroom. But you didn't, because you stopped me. He opened his eyes, and they were still more wolf than man. Because you gave me something to focus on besides the rage. We make a good team. Florence? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, vibrating with restrained energy. What you did in there, exposing the forgery, holding your ground under pressure, that was extraordinary. I just looked at the details. You dismantled his entire case with paper and memory. Lucian's gaze burned into hers. Do you understand how rare that is? How valuable? I understand that we won a battle, but not the war. Reginald's still out there. Irene, he just escalated to open violence, which means he's desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. Or they get more dangerous. Florence wrapped her arms around herself. Lucian, those men in the courtroom, they weren't trying to kill us. They were trying to take me. Reginald's not giving up. Neither am I. He moved across the carriage in one fluid motion, sitting beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, smell pine and smoke, and the sharp edge of adrenaline. Listen to me carefully. You've proven yourself today, not just to the magistrate, but to my pack. You stood your ground against a man who's terrorized you for months. You protected me from exposure. You fought when fighting was the only option. Where is this going? It's going, Lucian said, his hand coming up to cup her face, her toward me asking if you still want that kiss we talked about this morning. Florence's breath caught. Right now, in a moving carriage while running from my homicidal guardian, especially right now. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Because you deserve to choose something for yourself. Not because you're trapped or desperate or performing, just because you want to. The truth of it hit her like lightning. For the first time since her father died, she had actual choice. Not a lesser of evils, not a calculated survival move. Real, honest choice. She chose. Florence closed the distance and kissed him. His response was immediate and devastating. One hand slid into her hair, scattering pins, while the other pulled her closer. The kiss was urgent and consuming. Months of restrained want finally unleashed. As she tasted his groan when her hands found his chest, felt his muscles tense under her palms. Florence? Her name was a growl against her lips. If we don't stop, then don't stop. She kissed him harder, desperate to feel something good after so much fear and violence. Please don't stop. He made a rough sound and shifted, pulling her into his lap. The new position let her feel exactly how much he wanted this, wanted her, and the knowledge sent heat flooding through her. His mouth moved to her throat, teeth grazing sensitive skin, and she gasped. Tell me if it's too much, he said against her pulse. It's not enough. His hands found her waist, thumbs pressing through silk and stays. The things I want to do to you. The carriage hit a rut. They broke apart, panting. Reality crashed back in. Florence was in Lucian's lap, her hair half undone, her carefully composed courtroom appearance utterly destroyed. And she didn't care. We should stop, Lucian said, but he didn't move to release her. We should. Florence rested her forehead against his. But I don't want to. Neither do I, his arms tightened around her. But we're about to arrive at the estate, and the entire household will see you disheveled and in my arms, and tomorrow the scandal will be everywhere. Let it be everywhere. Florence pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I'm tired of caring what people think. I'd rather be honest about wanting you than perform respectability for their comfort. Something fierce and possessive flashed across his face. Dangerous words, Florence. Good, I'm done being safe. He kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense. When they finally separated, his expression was equal parts satisfaction and frustration. After we've dealt with Crane, he said, after you're safe and free and legally your own person, I'm going to finish what we started. Promise? I swear it. Lucian helped her back to her own seat, though his reluctance was obvious. And when I do, you're going to understand exactly what it means to be claimed by an alpha. The promise in those words sent shivers down her spine. The carriage pulled up to the estate. Through the window, Florence could see Mrs. Weatherby and the household staff waiting on the steps, and their expressions were grim. Something's wrong, Lucian said, his body going tense. They climbed out. Mrs. Weatherby approached immediately. My lord, we have a problem. A courier arrived an hour ago with an emergency writ from London. A Parliament's ordered an immediate inquiry into your territorial management. They're sending investigators tomorrow morning. Lucian's face went hard. Let me guess. The complaint was filed by Lord Reginald Crane and signed by 3 members of Parliament he has in his pocket. Mrs. Weatherby handed over the writ. They're questioning your fitness to hold territory, citing irregular sheltering of criminal elements and abuse of authority. If the inquiry goes against you, I lose territorial rights, Lucian finished. Which means I lose the authority to protect Florence. Florence's stomach dropped. He planned this. The court attack was theater. This is his real move. He's backing me into a corner. Lucian crushed the writ in his fist. Either I give you up to maintain pack stability, or I fight the inquiry and risk everything. So we fight both, Florence said. We finish gathering evidence against him while simultaneously defending your authority. Florence, if this inquiry goes wrong, it won't just be me who falls. The entire pack will be vulnerable. Territories don't stay empty. Rival packs will move in. There'll be violence, possibly war. Then we make sure the inquiry doesn't go wrong. Florence grabbed his hand. You said I proved myself today, so prove you meant it. Let me help you win this. Lucian stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her close and kissed her hard, right there on the steps, in front of the entire household. When he released her, his eyes were blazing. Together, then, we end this. Tomorrow. The parliamentary investigators arrived at dawn with an escort of 20 men, our half-soldiers, half-bureaucrats with ledgers and suspicious eyes. Florence watched from the study window as they assembled in the courtyard. Lucian stood beside her, perfectly composed in formal black, but she could feel the tension radiating from him. Lord Ashford leads the inquiry, he said quietly. He's reasonable but inflexible. And the two men flanking him, Lord Pembroke and Sir Edmund Thorne, are Crane's allies in Parliament. Florence's stomach dropped. Reginald bought himself protection. He's been buying it for years. Lucian's hand found hers, squeezed briefly. This won't be a fair hearing, Florence. They'll try to discredit every piece of evidence we present. Then we overwhelm them with evidence they can't discredit. She turned from the window. The financial records, Dr. Croft's testimony, and Malcolm Sinclair's death investigation, we use everything. Dr. Croft arrived an hour ago. He's terrified, but Ashcombe has him prepared. Lucian's expression was grim. And the Edinburgh authorities finished their review of Malcolm's death. The findings are damning. How damning. Arsenic poisoning masked as heart failure. The physician who signed the death certificate has fled the country. Lucian's voice was hard. We can't prove Crane ordered it, but the timing and method are unmistakable. A knock. Silas entered, his expression dark. They're requesting entry, my lord. And there's something else. A carriage arrived 10 minutes ago. Lord Crane is here with his own parliamentary escort. Florence and Lucian exchanged glances. He's forcing a confrontation, Lucian said. In front of witnesses, he controls. Or he's desperate enough to think he can still win. Florence straightened her shoulders. Either way, we don't back down. The inquiry was held in the Great Hall. Witnesses assembled on both sides, like a trial. Ashcombe sat at their table with folders of evidence. Across the aisle, Reginald conferred with 3 solicitors and his parliamentary allies. Lord Ashford opened his leather portfolio. Baron Ravencroft, you stand accused of abuse of territorial authority, unlawful detention of a ward under medical care, corruption of proper guardianship protocols, and harboring dangerous elements within your territory. These are serious charges that could result in the stripping of your peerage and territorial rights. How do you answer? The accusations are false, Lucian said calmly. Manufactured by a man attempting to cover his own crimes. Lord Pembroke, elderly, stone-faced, interrupted. This inquiry is not about Lord Crane's conduct. It is about yours, Baron Ravencroft. Then you're investigating the wrong man. Florence stood before Lucian could stop her. My lords, Baron Ravencroft extracted me from an asylum where I was being held on falsified commitment papers. He did so because I had no other legal recourse and was in immediate danger. Miss Sinclair, Sir Edmund said smoothly, your guardian has expressed deep concern for your well-being. Your public breakdown at the Pemberton Ball, your erratic behavior, these suggest you may not be the most reliable witness to your own circumstances. My erratic behavior was a calculated performance designed to void an illegitimate marriage contract. Florence kept her voice level. And I can prove every word. Ashcombe stood. My lords, if I may present evidence. You may not, Pembroke snapped. We will hear from the petitioner first. Lord Crane, please state your grievances. Reginald rose, the picture of wounded dignity. My lords, I have devoted 18 months to protecting my late friend's daughter from her own instability. When traditional medical care proved insufficient, I sought the expertise of Briarwood House. Baron Ravencroft interfered with that care, removed Miss Sinclair without legal authority, and has since held her in isolation at his estate, preventing family contact and corrupting her judgment. Isolation? Florence's voice cut through the hall. I've had access to legal counsel, medical care, and freedom of movement within the estate. The only person who's tried to isolate me is you, Reginald, through locked asylum doors and forged commitment papers. Forged? Reginald's face flushed. These are wild accusations. That I can substantiate. Ashcombe pulled out the first folder. My lords, the commitment documents contain demonstrable irregularities. The intake date precedes Miss Sinclair's actual arrival at the facility. The psychological evaluation is attributed to a physician who was documented to be in London at the time. And the authorizing signature belongs to a doctor who has since admitted, under oath, that he was pressured to falsify records. Under oath to whom? Sir Edmund demanded. To me, my lord. A thin, nervous man stood from the witness gallery, Dr. Croft, his hands shaking but his voice clear. I am Dr. Ambrose Croft, attending physician at Briarwood House. Lord Crane paid me £200 to expedite Miss Sinclair's commitment without proper psychiatric evaluation. When I expressed reservations, he threatened to destroy my medical license and career. The hall erupted in whispers. Pembroke slammed his hand on the table. This is hearsay. It's sworn testimony backed by bank records. Ashcombe produced more documents. Payments from Lord Crane's accounts to Dr. Croft, dated the week before Miss Sinclair's commitment. Additionally, we have signed confessions from 3 men hired by Lord Crane to abduct Miss Sinclair from Baron Ravencroft's estate through violent means. Concerned retrieval of a vulnerable ward, Reginald started, with clubs, knives, and explicit instructions to use any means necessary. Lucian's voice was ice. 2 separate attempts, my lords. One at my estate, one at the county courthouse during legal proceedings. Multiple witnesses to both. Ashford studied the documents, his expression troubled, but Pembroke waved dismissively. Even if Lord Crane's methods were overzealous, they stemmed from legitimate concern for his ward. The core question remains, did Baron Ravencroft exceed his authority? The core question, Florence said clearly, is whether I needed a guardian at all. My lords, I turned 21 4 months ago, and under the terms of my father's will, the guardianship should have dissolved automatically on my birthday. Lord Crane concealed my legal majority to maintain control of my inheritance. You have no proof of that, Sir Edmund said. Actually, we do. Ashcombe produced another folder. After considerable effort, we located the original will, not the copy Lord Crane provided, but the document filed with the courts 18 years ago. It clearly states that guardianship terminates upon Miss Sinclair's 21st birthday or marriage, whichever comes first. Lord Crane has been operating under false legal authority for 4 months. Reginald shot to his feet. That will is incomplete. There was a codicil, a guardianship extension clause my friend added months before his death, concerned about Florence's romantic judgment. A clause that appears on paper with no watermark, Florence interrupted, bearing a signature lacking my father's characteristic flourish, dated to a period when he was too ill to hold a pen. I examined that document in court 3 days ago, my lords. It's a forgery. Speculation, Reginald's voice rose. You're not a documents expert. But I am, a new voice said. An elderly man in scholar's robes stood. Professor Aldrich Pemberton, documents authentication specialist from Oxford. I've examined both the alleged codicil and samples of the late Mr. Sinclair's authenticated signatures. The codicil is a skilled forgery, but a forgery nonetheless. The ink composition is wrong for the stated date, and the pressure patterns are inconsistent with a man suffering from the documented illness Mr. Sinclair experienced in his final months. The room went utterly silent. Ashford leaned back in his chair. Lord Crane, these are extremely serious allegations. Fabrications orchestrated by Ravencroft. And what of your cousin, my lord? Lucian's voice cut through. Malcolm Sinclair of Edinburgh, the man who would have contested this fraudulent guardianship had he not died so conveniently 3 weeks ago. Reginald's face went white. The Edinburgh authorities have concluded their investigation, Ashcombe said quietly. Malcolm Sinclair died of arsenic poisoning, deliberately administered and disguised as heart failure. The physician who signed the false death certificate has fled to the continent. While we cannot yet prove Lord Crane ordered the murder, the financial records show a payment of £500 to a known associate of that physician, dated 1 week before Mr. Sinclair's death. The hall erupted. Ashford called for order, but the damage was done. Even Pembroke and Sir Edmund looked shaken. These are circumstantial, Reginald began. These are patterns, Florence said, her voice ringing clear. Forgery, bribery, falsified medical records, violence, possible murder. All designed to steal my inheritance and silence anyone who questioned your authority. You didn't protect me, Reginald. You imprisoned me. And when Baron Ravencroft offered genuine protection, you tried to destroy him too. I tried to save you from a monster. Reginald's mask finally cracked. You don't understand what you're defending, Florence. Ravencroft isn't human. None of them are. They're abominations. Beasts pretending to be civilized. That's enough, Ashford said sharply. But Reginald was past reason. He turned to his parliamentary allies. You wanted proof of dangerous elements? I'll give you proof. He pulled a pistol from his coat. Baron Ravencroft, why don't you show these gentlemen what you really are? Show them the wolf. Chaos. Soldiers moved to disarm him, but Reginald's own men, 4 armed guards, blocked them. Put down the weapon, Ashford commanded. Not until he admits what he is. Reginald's aim fixed on Lucian. Shift, Ravencroft. Show them the monster, or I'll shoot Miss Sinclair and force you to. The pistol swung toward Florence. Lucian's control shattered. The shift was explosive, bones cracking, fur erupting, his body remaking itself in seconds into a massive silver-dark wolf that dwarfed everything in the hall. Clothes tore. The wolf's snarl shook the rafters. Screams erupted. Investigators scrambled back. Soldiers raised muskets. Florence threw herself between the wolf and the guns. Don't shoot. That's a demon, one of the soldiers shouted. That's Baron Lucian Ravencroft, and he just saved my life. Florence kept her arms spread wide. Lord Crane pulled a weapon and threatened to murder me. The Baron defended me. That's his legal right. Legal right? Pembroke's voice was shrill with panic. That creature has no legal rights. He has every right. Florence's voice rang with authority. He's a peer of the realm, a territorial governor, and yes, a wolf shifter. They exist, my lords. They've always existed. And they've lived peacefully in this territory for generations. The wolf's amber eyes fixed on Reginald, who stood frozen with the pistol still in his hand. You wanted proof I'm a monster? Lucian's voice came from the wolf. Rough, barely human, but unmistakable. Here I am. Shoot me again, Crane. Let's see what happens. Again? Ashford's head snapped toward Reginald. He shot the Baron yesterday, Florence said. During the courthouse attack. Baron Ravencroft shifted then too, not to kill, but to protect me from armed assailants Lord Crane had hired. You admit he's dangerous, Sir Edmund started. I admit he's powerful. There's a difference. Florence turned to face the investigators fully, her back to the wolf, an act of trust that made several men gasp. My lords, Baron Ravencroft has governed this territory for 15 years. In that time, has there been unusual violence, unexplained disappearances, any evidence of predation on human populations? Silence. The territorial management records are pristine, Ashcombe said quietly. Dispute resolution, infrastructure development, protection of vulnerable populations, all handled with remarkable efficiency and fairness. Because he's not a monster, Florence continued. He's a leader who happens to be different. And the only reason we're having this conversation is because Lord Crane, a man we've just proven is a forger, a fraud, and quite possibly a murderer, decided that exposing Baron Ravencroft's nature was preferable to facing justice for his own crimes. Even if what you say is true, Pembroke said, his voice shaking, we cannot simply ignore. This is unprecedented. The wolf moved forward slowly and deliberately. Every soldier tensed. But instead of attacking, the wolf approached Ashford and lowered its massive head in a gesture of submission. Ashford stared. Baron Ravencroft, can you understand me in this form? The wolf's ears flicked forward, clear acknowledgement. If I order you to surrender control of this territory to human governance, will you comply? The wolf's growl was low and warning. Florence felt it vibrate through the floor. He's telling you no, she said. And he has that right. This territory has been under Ravencroft governance for 200 years. The pack has never violated the social contract. They protect, they serve, they ask only to be left in peace. You have no legal grounds to strip that authority simply because you've discovered they're not human. We have every ground, Sir Edmund snapped. Paul, they're a threat to... To what? Silas Ward stepped forward, his own eyes flashing amber. To your sense of superiority. We've been your soldiers, your servants, your neighbors for centuries. We've fought in your wars, paid your taxes, obeyed your laws. The only thing that's changed is that now you know what we are." Mrs. Weatherby joined him. "My family has served the crown for 4 generations. My son died at Waterloo fighting for England. Don't you dare call us threats." More pack members stepped forward. A dozen, then 2 dozen, all with the same amber flash in their eyes. Ashford looked around the hall in dawning horror. "How many? Enough!" Lucian's voice rumbled from the wolf. "In this territory, in others throughout England, we're integrated into every level of society. Governesses, solicitors, physicians, soldiers. And we've been here all along." "This is impossible," Pembroke whispered. "This is reality." Florence moved to stand beside the wolf, her hand resting on its massive head. "And you have 2 choices, my lords. You can panic and try to root out every shifter in England, which will result in bloodshed, chaos, and the collapse of social order. Or you can accept that difference doesn't automatically mean danger, and allow those who've proven themselves trustworthy to continue serving as they always have. You're asking us to harbor monsters. I'm asking you to see people." Florence's voice was fierce. "Baron Ravencroft protected me when every human authority failed. He gave me legal counsel when I had none. He risked his territory and his pack to stop a man from destroying me. What kind of monster does that?" A long, terrible silence. And then Ashford spoke, his voice heavy. "This inquiry cannot resolve such questions. This is a matter for the Crown, for Parliament as a whole, possibly for—" He stopped. "Lord Crane, you will be arrested and charged with fraud, corruption of guardianship, conspiracy to commit murder, assault with a deadly weapon, and threatening a peer of the realm. Your parliamentary protections are hereby suspended pending investigation." Soldiers moved to seize Reginald. He struggled, screaming. "You're making a mistake. These creatures will destroy everything." "The only destruction I see," Ashford said coldly, "is what you've wrought, Lord Crane." They dragged him toward the doors. As he passed Florence, he spat. "You've destroyed yourself. Society will never accept you now. It's a madwoman who defends beasts. I'd rather be honest and rejected than respectable and owned." Florence didn't flinch. "And I'm not the one in chains." The doors closed behind him. The wolf shifted back, bones cracking, fur receding. Lucian knelt on the marble, and Mrs. Weatherby appeared with a cloak. Ashford watched the transformation with visible discomfort. "Baron Ravencroft, the Crown will require answers. Full disclosure of shifter populations, territorial boundaries, hierarchies. And there will be conditions." "What conditions?" Lucian's voice was hoarse as he wrapped the cloak around himself. "Regular inspections, oversight councils, strict protocols on human-shifter interactions, and immediate reporting of any incidents that could pose public danger." Ashford's expression was grim. "You've asked for acceptance, but acceptance comes with accountability." "We've always been accountable," Silas said. "We just had to hide it." "And your allies in other territories?" Ashford asked. "Will they submit to these terms?" "Some will, some won't." Lucian stood, leaning heavily on Florence. "We're not a monolith, my lord. Pack structures differ. Some territories are peaceful, others less so. You've just opened a door you can't close, whether you like what comes through it or not." "That sounds like a threat." "It's a warning." Lucian's gaze was steady. "We've kept the peace because it served us. If you start hunting shifters, if you violate the territories that have remained peaceful, you'll force a war no one can win." Ashford closed his eyes briefly. "This inquiry is concluded. Baron Ravencroft's territorial authority is maintained pending Crown review. Miss Sinclair is declared legally independent with full control of her inheritance, pending authentication of the necessary documents, and the matter of shifter governance will be referred to a special parliamentary committee." He gathered his papers with shaking hands. "We will reconvene in 6 weeks. In the meantime, Baron Ravencroft, I strongly suggest you prepare your allies for intense scrutiny." "And I suggest," Lucian said quietly, "that Parliament prepares for the possibility that we won't all submit peacefully to being treated as threats." The investigators left in tense silence. Only Florence, Lucian, the pack, and Ashcombe remained. "That was a disaster," Silas said flatly. "That was exposure." Lucian's voice was rough. "Every pack in England just became vulnerable. Because of me. Florence felt sick. Because I defended you. Felt because Crane forced it. Lucian pulled her close. And because the alternative was letting him destroy you, I'd make the same choice again. But the other territories will be furious, terrified. Some will demand I be exiled for endangering them. Others will prepare for war. Lucian's arms tightened around her. We've bought time, Florence, not safety, not peace, just time. Mrs. Weatherby cleared her throat. Then we'd better use it wisely. Silas, send word to the Allied Pacts. We need a council meeting within the week. Ashcombe, what's our legal standing if Parliament decides to revoke territorial rights? Complicated, Ashcombe said. Unprecedented. We'll need constitutional scholars and precedents dating back to the Magna Carta. He adjusted his spectacles. And frankly, if they decide to strip rights based solely on species, the legal fight will take years. We don't have years, Silas said. We have weeks before that committee convenes, and every pack in England will be watching to see what terms we accept. Florence pulled back from Lucian. Then we negotiate from strength. We document everything, crime rates in shifter territories versus human-governed ones, economic contributions, military service records. We prove your value systematically. And if they don't care about value, Lucienne asked, if fear outweighs evidence, then we prepare for the worst. Florence met his gaze. Together. Because I'm not leaving, Lucienne. Not when this gets hard. Not when Parliament comes calling. Not ever. Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. Even if staying means you're ostracized from human society, marked as a shifter sympathizer, and possibly in danger if anti-shifter violence escalates, especially then. Florence took his hand. You chose to protect me when I had nothing. I choose to stand with you when everything's on the line. That's what partnership means. Foolish woman, Lucian said roughly, but he pulled her close and kissed her, desperate and claiming and grateful. When they broke apart, Mrs. Weatherby was smiling despite the tension. Well, at least we'll face the apocalypse with proper romance. 6 weeks later, Florence stood in the parliamentary committee room wearing deep blue silk that made her look every inch the Baroness she wasn't yet, not officially. The committee had assembled. 12 lords, 3 bishops, 2 military commanders, and a handful of scholars. All of them watching her with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. Miss Sinclair, the committee chair said, you've been invited to testify about your experiences with Baron Ravencroft and his pack. Please speak freely. Florence took a breath. Across the room, Lucian sat with rigid control, flanked by Silas and 3 other pack representatives. They'd agreed she would speak first. Her humanity gave her credibility they couldn't claim. My lords, 6 weeks ago, I was a woman trapped by fraud, facing illegal commitment and theft of my inheritance. Every human institution failed me. Magistrates, physicians, legal counsel, all were either complicit in Lord Crane's crimes or powerless to stop them. She met the committee chair's gaze. Baron Ravencroft succeeded where they failed, not through violence or deception, but through simple justice. He saw what was happening, recognized it as wrong. He enacted. By abducting you from lawful medical care, by extracting me from illegal detention, the court documents I submitted prove the commitment was fraudulent. Dr. Croft's testimony confirms it. Lord Crane is currently awaiting trial for multiple felonies, including conspiracy to commit murder. Florence's voice strengthened. The question before this committee isn't whether Baron Ravencroft acted appropriately. The evidence proves he did. The question is whether you'll punish him for being different while doing so. One of the bishops leaned forward. Miss Sinclair, are you truly asking us to ignore the abomination of werewolves? Creatures mentioned in Scripture as unholy? I'm asking you to judge actions, not nature. Baron Ravencroft has governed justly for 15 years. His territory has lower crime rates and better infrastructure and higher population satisfaction than comparable regions. Those are measurable facts, achieved through supernatural means, achieved through effective leadership. Florence pulled out the reports Ashcombe had compiled. These are comparative analyses of territorial governance across England. Shifter-governed territories consistently outperform human-governed ones in dispute resolution, economic stability, and protection of vulnerable populations. If that's monstrous, Perhaps we need new definitions. They're predators, one of the military commanders said bluntly. How can we trust predators to govern prey? Lucian stood. By observing our behavior, General, not our biology. His voice was controlled but hard. I've fought in 2 wars for the crown. But my pack members have served in every major military campaign for the past century. We've bled for England. Some of us have died for it. At what point does service earn trust? When you stop being dangerous. I'll always be dangerous. Lucian's eyes flashed amber. So is every soldier you command. The question isn't capability, it's choice. And we choose to use our strength in service, not domination. The committee murmured. Florence saw doubt on some faces, calculation on others. The chair cleared his throat. The committee has reviewed the evidence extensively. We acknowledge that Baron Ravencroft's governance record is exemplary. We also acknowledge the unprecedented nature of this situation. He paused. Our preliminary finding is this. Shifter-governed territories may maintain autonomous rule under enhanced oversight. Regular inspections will be mandatory. Any violent incidents must be reported immediately, and shifter populations must register with local authorities. Registration leads to persecution, Silas said flatly. History proves it. And secrecy leads to fear. The chair's voice was firm. These are the terms, gentlemen. Accept them, or face territorial dissolution. Lucian looked at Florence. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the impossible choice between submission and resistance. We need time to consult with other territories, Lucian said finally. This affects more than just my pack. You have 2 weeks. After that, we'll proceed with or without your cooperation. The chair stood. This session is adjourned. They returned to the estate in tense silence. The packed carriage, Lucian, Florence, Silas, Ashcombe, felt too small for the weight of what they carried. Registration is a death sentence, Silas said quietly. The moment there's a list, someone will use it. But refusal means war, Ashcombe countered. Parliament has the military resources. And we have centuries of survival instinct, Lucian interrupted. If they push too hard, packs will vanish, go rogue, some will fight. Florence listened to them debate strategies, contingencies, worst-case scenarios. Then she spoke. What if we offer a compromise? 3 pairs of eyes turned to her. Registration is the sticking point. It's what Parliament wants for control, and what the packs fear most. What if we propose voluntary integration instead? Shifters who want to live openly can register and gain legal protections. Those who prefer privacy can remain unregistered but lose certain territorial rights. That splits the pack, Silas objected. It gives choice. Florence leaned forward. Right now, Parliament sees shifters as either hidden threats or conquered subjects. Show them a third option, allies, partners, people integrating by choice, not force. Lucian studied her. You're proposing we weaponize voluntary cooperation. I'm proposing we demonstrate trust before demanding it in return. Florence met his gaze. Some packs will hate it, but some might see the advantage in legal recognition and protection. It could work, Ashcombe said slowly, if we frame it as a pilot program. Limited registration in friendly territories. Prove it can function safely, then expand. Or it could create a registry for future purges. Silas's voice was hard. But everything's a risk right now. Lucian's hand found Florence's. But strategic cooperation might be better than forced submission or open war. I'll present it to the council, Silas said reluctantly. They won't like it. They don't have to like it. They just have to survive. Lucian looked out the carriage window at the darkening countryside. And survival sometimes means adapting. 3 months after the inquiry, Florence sat in her new office, a small building in town, freshly painted with women's legal advocacy etched on the window. She'd fought for this. Fundraised, negotiated, convinced skeptical townsfolk that a woman who defended werewolves might still help their daughters and wives with legal struggles. Business was slow, but it was hers. A knock. Mrs. Weatherby entered with tea. How's the first week? Quiet. But I have 3 consultations scheduled for next week. Florence accepted the cup gratefully. How are things at the estate? Tense. The council's debating Lucian's proposal. Half want to try the voluntary registration. The other half think he's sold them out. Mrs. Weatherby's expression was weary. There was nearly a challenge yesterday. Silas stopped it, but barely. Florence's stomach dropped. A leadership challenge? Some of the younger wolves think Lucian's gone soft. That protecting you and cooperating with Parliament makes him weak. Mrs. Weatherby sat heavily. They don't understand strategy. They just see submission. Should I? No. The housekeeper's voice was firm. You staying away from pack politics right now is strategic. If you're there, they'll blame you for his choices. You better to let him handle it. It felt like cowardice, but Florence nodded. The door opened again. Lucian entered, and Florence's breath caught. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, tension in every line of his body. Lucian? He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, just held her, breathing her in. Mrs. Weatherby quietly excused herself. How bad? Florence asked against his chest. We're holding, barely. His voice was rough. Parliament approved the pilot program. 10 territories will implement voluntary registration starting next month. Mine is one of them. That's good news. It's complicated news. 3 packs have already declared they'll go rogue rather than participate. There's talk of reforming traditional hierarchies. Are wolves who think any cooperation with humans is betrayal. Lucian pulled back enough to meet her eyes. Florence, this could get violent. Not from Parliament, from our own people. Then we prepare for that too. She cupped his face. You're not wrong to try for peace, even if others can't see it yet. I'm risking everything on a gamble. You're building something better. Florence kissed him softly. And I'm here, for all of it. His arms tightened around her. I don't deserve you. You deserve someone who sees you clearly, who knows you're capable of terrible things and chooses you anyway. She smiled. Lucky for you, I'm stubborn. Stubborn, brilliant, brave to the point of recklessness. Lucian's mouth curved. How did I survive before you? You were lonelier, more controlled? I'm probably more efficient. Definitely more miserable. He kissed her again, deeper this time. Florence Sinclair, will you marry me? She froze. What? Marry me. Not because of the bond or pack politics or scandal management. Marry me because I love you and I want you as my partner in everything. Legally, publicly, permanently. Florence's heart hammered. Lucian, if I marry you right now, while everything's unstable, it'll be complicated, controversial, possibly dangerous. His gaze held hers. I know, but I'm asking anyway. Because I don't want to wait for perfect conditions that may never come. I want to choose you, now, in the middle of chaos. She should be practical. Should wait until things settled, until the political situation stabilized, until society had adjusted to shifter exposure. Instead, Florence heard herself say, yes. Lucian's smile was brilliant and fierce. He kissed her until she was breathless, until the office walls felt too close and too public. Tonight, he said against her mouth, come home tonight. Stay, not as a guest or a protected asset. Stay as mine. And yours is my own, Florence corrected breathlessly. Always. His hands framed her face. Florence, after tonight, there's no going back. The bond, the claiming, everything that means, I know what it means. She met his gaze steadily. I'm choosing it. Choosing you. All of it. That night, Florence stood in Lucian's private chambers, larger than the Rose Room, darker, distinctly his territory. A fire burned in the grate. Heavy curtains blocked the moon. He'd given her space to change, to prepare. Now she waited in a silk robe, her heart racing. At the door opened, Lucian entered, still dressed but barefoot. Vulnerability in that small detail. Last chance, he said quietly. I can still escort you back to your room. No questions, no judgment. Florence let the robe fall. His control shattered. He crossed the room and claimed her mouth in a kiss that was pure possession. She responded with equal hunger, her hands finding skin, muscle, the evidence of battles survived. Florence. Her name was a growl against her throat. Tell me, yes. She pulled him toward the bed. Yes to everything. They moved together, urgent and consuming. Months of restraint finally unleashed. His hands mapped her body with reverent intensity. Her nails left marks on his shoulders, when he finally claimed her completely. The bond roared to life between them, primal and unbreakable. Later, entangled together in sheets that smelled of pine and smoke and them, Florence traced the scar on his shoulder. "Does it hurt?" she asked. "Not anymore." Lucian's hand caught hers, brought it to his mouth. "Florence, what we just did, the claiming, it's permanent. You're Pack now, bound to me, to this territory, to everything that comes with it." "I know. Parliament might use it against us. Society will definitely condemn it. And if the rogue packs escalate, then we face it together." Florence shifted to meet his gaze. "Lucian, I didn't choose safety. I chose you. I chose purpose. I chose a life where being smart and brave actually matters. Everything else is just details." He kissed her softly. "Stubborn woman. You're stubborn woman," she smiled. "And you're stuck with me now. Thank God for that." Lucian pulled her close, and for the first time in months, some of the tension finally left his body. "Thank God for you." Outside, the world remained complicated and dangerous. Parliament watched. Packs debated. Society whispered. But here, in this moment, they were simply two people who'd fought for freedom and found something better. Partnership, purpose, and love, fierce enough to challenge empires. And whatever came next, they'd face it together.